Deep in the murky bayous of Louisiana, a family has lived hidden from the world for over 4 decades. They weren't just secluded, they were twisted by the shadows of their own isolation, surviving in a place no one dared to step into. Rumors of strange lights, eerie screams, and boats vanishing without a trace have always surrounded the swamp. But the truth is far more shocking than the whispers. This is the story of a family trapped by their own past, a lineage of secrets, unusual customs, and dark bonds that the modern world could never imagine. For 44 years, they remained unseen, until one daring journalist stumbled upon the edge of their world. Prepare yourself for a tale where the ordinary and the horrifying collide, where curiosity becomes obsession, and where every secret uncovered only leads deeper into the swamp. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. Chapter 1. The Edge of the Bayou. The sun was setting over the Louisiana swamp, casting long shadows over the twisted cypress trees. The air was thick, humid, and carried the scent of decay mixed with wildflowers. Emma had always been drawn to places most people avoided, and tonight her curiosity was pushing her deeper into the swamp than ever before. Rumors had whispered of a family living hidden here, a lineage that the world had forgotten, or perhaps feared. Her boots sank into the soft mud as she moved cautiously, the croak of frogs and the splash of distant fish echoing in the growing darkness. Every sound felt magnified in the still air. Emma's camera hung around her neck, ready to capture whatever she might find, yet she felt an unease that no lens could ever frame. Stories of strange lights and distant haunting cries had made her both terrified and obsessed. Then she saw it, a faint glow flickering between the trees. Not the soft, natural light of fireflies, but something deliberate, purposeful. The air grew colder as she approached, the swamp seeming to lean in around her, and for a moment Emma felt as though unseen eyes were tracking her every move. She paused, heart pounding. This was it, the edge of a secret that no one in the modern world had ever uncovered. And as the mist began to curl around her legs, she realized the truth. Some places weren't meant to be found. Next, we discover the first glimpse of the family's hidden world and the eerie customs they cling to. Chapter 2. Whispers Among the Trees. Emma crept closer to the flickering glow, her camera shaking slightly in her hands. The deeper she went into the swamp, the thicker the mist became, curling around tree trunks like ghostly fingers. Shadows danced unnaturally, and for a moment she felt disoriented, as if the swamp itself were alive, watching her, guiding her along some secret path. A distant sound made her freeze, a child's laugh. High-pitched, fleeting, and almost melodic. It didn't belong here, yet it echoed clearly in the dense air. Her rational mind screamed that no children lived in the swamp, yet her curiosity pushed her forward. Each step took her closer to the glow, and with every movement, the strange laugh was replaced by murmurs, soft, almost human, but twisted. Through the trees she saw the first glimpse of them, figures hunched and pale, faces obscured by the shadows, moving with an unnatural rhythm. They weren't like any family she had ever known. Their eyes reflected the firelight, watching her with an intensity that made her stomach churn. She raised her camera, but her hands trembled too violently to take a clear shot. Then one figure stepped forward, a woman, tall and thin, with hair like tangled reeds. Her eyes, unnervingly calm, met Emma's directly. A silence settled over the clearing, broken only by the distant croak of a bullfrog. Emma wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words caught in her throat. Something about the way they moved, the way they lived. It was like stepping into another world, one untouched by time, one where rules of society didn't apply. Emma's journalist instincts screamed for answers, but a deeper, primal part of her knew she had crossed a line. Yet before she could retreat, she noticed the small signs scattered around, makeshift symbols carved into the bark, strange talismans hanging from branches, and faint trail was leading deeper into the swamp. These people were guarding something ancient and forbidden. Her pulse raced as she realized she was no longer an observer. She was a participant in their hidden world. And as the mist thickened, swallowing the edges of the firelight, Emma understood. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. Next, we discover the shocking secrets of the family's hidden home and the rituals that keep their world alive. Chapter 3. Secrets of the Hidden Homestead. The firelight led Emma to the edge of a clearing where the swamp seemed to open into a small, almost forgotten homestead. The structures were crude, built from weathered wood and tangled vines, blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. Moss hung like drapes from the roofs, and the ground was littered with leaves and debris. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress, a world unto itself. As she crept closer, the faint smell of smoke and something else, earthy, almost metallic, filled the air. Emma noticed handmade traps along the edges of the clearing, pits covered with branches, tripwires rigged with tin cans, and sharpened stakes hidden in the mud. Whoever lived here did not want visitors. And yet, here she was, drawn by the mystery, heart hammering in her chest. A soft humming drifted through the mist. Following it, Emma reached the main structure, a low, sprawling hut with a small doorway. Inside, shadows danced against walls made of intertwined branches. The humming grew louder, revealing voices, childlike yet distorted, adults speaking in hushed tones that were almost musical. Emma peeked through a slit in the wall. She saw them, members of the family gathered around a fire. Their features were strangely similar, narrow faces, pale skin, eyes sharp and watchful. Some stitched fabrics by hand, while others whispered to one another in a language she didn't recognize. Every movement felt deliberate, as if choreographed, yet somehow unnerving. On a table nearby, there were objects that made her stomach twist: carved dolls, masks with hollow eyes, and strange symbols etched into wood. She realized these were not just decorations, they were tools of their rituals, remnants of their hidden customs. And the more she looked, the more she understood why the family had stayed hidden all these years. The swamp wasn't just a hose, it was a shield from a world that would never understand them. Emma's fascination battled with fear. Each step closer risked discovery, but every instinct screamed to learn more. These people, strange and secretive as they were, held a story that the world had long forgotten. And as the moonlight broke through the canopy, reflecting on the murky waters, Emma knew she was on the verge of uncovering truths that no outsider had ever seen, and some that perhaps should have remained buried. Next, we discover the dark rites and unusual customs that have kept the family hidden for decades. Chapter 4. Rituals of the Forgotten. Emma stayed hidden behind a thick tangle of vines, her breath caught in her throat. The firelight inside the hut flickered, revealing movements she could barely comprehend. The family was preparing for something, a ceremony, a ritual, a tradition older than anyone outside these swamps could imagine. The adults moved with deliberate precision, passing objects back and forth, small carved figurines, dried herbs, and bowls of murky liquid that steamed in the cool night air. Their whispers formed patterns, almost musical, yet the words themselves were foreign. Emma tried to memorize every detail, every motion, knowing that this scene was unlike anything she'd ever witnessed before. Children emerged from hidden nooks, their eyes wide but eerily knowing. They were instructed to carry bundles of leaves and arrange them around the fire in a precise formation. There was an order here, a structure that only made sense to the family. The air felt thick with energy, and Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. This was a world untouched by the outside, where every action had purpose and every gesture carried meaning. The matriarch, a woman with hair like twisted reeds, began chanting. Her voice was deep and resonant, commanding attention without anger. The family responded in unison, their voices layering together like the swamp itself was speaking. Emma realized that this ritual was not just tradition, it was survival, a way to maintain their isolation and their unique identity in a world that would never accept them. Emma's curiosity battled with growing dread. She had come seeking a story, but now she understood the danger of knowledge. Secrets this deeply guarded were protected by more than just fear. They were woven into the very fabric of this family's existence. She caught herself trembling as one figure turned slightly, glancing in her direction. The ritual continued, building in intensity. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally across the walls, and the air felt charged, almost electric. Emma realized that the swamp was not merely a backdrop. It was a participant, an extension of the family's hidden world. She had stepped into a story that had been unfolding for decades, and there was no turning back. Next, we discover Emma's first encounter with a member of the family and the chilling warning she receives about the swamp. Chapter 5. The Warning in the Mist. Emma's heart raced as she crept closer to the edge of the clearing. The ritual had ended, but the eerie energy lingered, thick as the swamp fog curling around the trees. She thought she was alone, yet a faint rustle in the reeds made her freeze. Something, or someone, was watching her. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving silently, almost floating over the wet earth. It was a young man, his eyes dark and piercing, reflecting the pale light of the dying fire. He didn't speak at first, just observed her, like a predator assessing prey, or a guardian testing an intruder. Emma's instincts screamed at her to flee, but she remained rooted, caught between fear and fascination. "You shouldn't be here," he said at last, his voice low but strangely calm. The words carried weight, a warning steeped in experience. The swamp doesn't forgive curiosity. Emma swallowed hard. I just wanted to understand. To see," she stammered, her camera swinging slightly from her shoulder. He tilted his head, studying her for a long, tense moment. "Understanding comes at a price," he said. "Some truths are meant to stay buried, or the swamp will take more than just your fear." The warning sent a chill down her spine. She realized that the family's isolation wasn't just by choice. They had built walls to protect themselves from something far darker than anyone outside could imagine. And now, by stepping into their world, she had crossed an invisible line. Emma's curiosity battled with rising panic. The swamp seemed to close in around her, every croak, splash, and rustle amplified. Shadows danced in her peripheral vision, and she felt the weight of unseen eyes tracking her every move. Yet the young man didn't move closer. He simply lingered, a silent sentinel. "You will see things," he continued, "things that the world isn't ready to understand. But Natishi, now this, every secret has a cost, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed." Emma nodded, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. She knew she had to witness more, but a part of her understood the risk she was taking. One misstep, one wrong glance, and she could become part of the swamp's secrets forever. As he turned and disappeared into the mist, Emma realized that the night had changed everything. The swamp was alive, the family's world was more complex than she could imagine, and her journey had only just begun. Next, we discover the hidden paths that lead deeper into the family's world, and the disturbing discoveries Emma makes along the way. Chapter 6. Paths hidden in the fog. The swamp had changed after the warning. Every shadow now seemed alive, every rustle of reeds a whispered caution. Emma moved slowly, her boots sinking into the mud, each step measured, her camera held tight. The young man's words echoed in her mind. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. She followed the faint trails she had noticed earlier, narrow paths carved through the dense swamp, almost invisible under the fog. Twisted branches formed natural archways overhead, dripping with moss that brushed her shoulders. Each step seemed to pull her deeper into a world that resisted intrusion. It wasn't just the family. The swamp itself seemed to test her resolve, nudging her back if she strayed too far. The distant sound of water drew her toward a small stream, its surface reflecting the moonlight in fractured patterns. There, half hidden under overhanging branches, she saw signs of recent life. Footprints pressed into the mud, crude markings on trees, and remnants of meals long forgotten. Emma realized these paths weren't just random. They were carefully maintained, a map of the family's secret world. Her attention was caught by a faint glow up ahead, smaller than the clearing she had discovered before. Curiosity overrode caution, and she approached, careful to remain silent. The glow revealed a tiny hut, barely more than a shelter built into the roots of an enormous cypress. Inside, she glimpsed a figure hunched over a bundle of objects, small dolls made from straw and cloth, and tiny carved symbols she didn't recognize. The figure suddenly straightened and looked directly at her. Emma froze, heart hammering. The person was a child, pale and alert, but with eyes that seemed far older than their age. "Why are you here?" the child whispered, their voice surprisingly firm for someone so small. Emma swallowed, unsure of what to say. Before she could answer, the child moved back into the shadows, disappearing into the mist as silently as they had appeared. Emma realized the family had eyes everywhere. No movement went unnoticed, no visitor went unexamined. Every path, every hut, every symbol was part of a network designed to protect their secrets. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. The swamp wasn't just a home. It was a labyrinth. And she, an outsider, was navigating its veins without a guide. The fog thickened around her, and she felt both trapped and exhilarated. She had glimpsed a world entirely hidden from society, a world both fascinating and terrifying in its intensity. Next, we discover the shocking truth about the family's past and the origin of the secrets they guard so fiercely. Chapter 7. The Family's Shadowed Past. The deeper Emma ventured into the swamp, the more she sensed the weight of history pressing down on her. Each hut, each symbol, each carefully hidden path seemed to whisper of events long buried, secrets that stretched back decades, decades during which the family had lived unseen, untouched by the outside world. She paused at a hollowed tree, worn smooth from years of use, noticing strange carvings etched into the bark. Some resembled letters, others shapes she couldn't identify, but one thing was clear. They told a story of isolation, of survival, and of choices that had twisted generations. Emma traced her fingers over the grooves, imagining the hands that had made them, hands that had never known the ordinary world beyond the swamp. A sudden movement drew her gaze to a figure emerging from behind a cluster of vines. It was the matriarch, her presence commanding yet silent. She didn't speak at first, only watched Emma with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge. Then she gestured for Emma to follow, leading her toward a larger clearing that Emma hadn't noticed before. There, in the center, lay objects that spoke of the family's past. Old journals, tattered photographs, and tools crafted with care. Emma picked up a journal, the pages yellowed with age. The entries described hardships, the struggle to survive in isolation, and a determination to protect their way of life at any cost. But beneath the surface, there were darker undertones, conflicts, whispered betrayals, and rituals that had bound them together in ways the outside world could never accept. The matriarch finally spoke, her voice low and steady. "We have lived here because the world outside does not understand us. You see curiosity as discovery, but here it is a choice that carries consequences." Emma nodded, understanding the gravity of her inti. Russian. The swamp was more than a hiding place. It was a shield, a barrier between them and a world that would never be able to accept the truth of who they were. As Emma turned to leave the clearing, she felt the full weight of the family's history pressing down. Every secret, every choice, every hidden act had led to this moment. She realized that to understand them, she would need to go further, deeper, and risk more than she had ever imagined. Next, we discover the disturbing truths of the family's customs and the first hints of why outsiders are never truly welcome. Chapter 8. The Rules of the Swamp. The swamp had grown darker, more oppressive, as Emma ventured further. Even the moonlight struggled to pierce the thick canopy of cypress trees, casting long shadows that danced across the water. Every sound, the splash of a fish, the rustle of leaves, the distant croak of frogs, felt magnified, like the swamp itself was speaking in a language she could almost understand. Emma followed a narrow path lined with strange markings carved into the trees, each symbol telling her something she didn't yet comprehend. She realized that the family had created a network of rules, an unspoken code that governed every aspect of life here. The way they moved, the way they spoke, the objects they used in their rituals, all of it followed patterns meant to maintain control over a world that refused to understand them. As she walked, She noticed small, deliberate traps, branches bent at odd angles, pits concealed with leaves, and thin ropes tied between trees. These weren't meant to harm outsiders intentionally, she realized, but to warn them, to test them, to see if they respected the boundaries. Anyone ignoring the signs risked consequences beyond mere physical danger. Ahead, the faint flicker of light drew her attention. She crept closer and saw the family gathered around another fire. This time the focus was on teaching. The children were being instructed in their customs, learning the rules that had kept the family hidden for decades. Emma watched as the matriarch demonstrated precise gestures, the children copying her movements exactly, their faces serious and disciplined. The atmosphere was intense, almost sacred. Emma understood that these were not just traditions, they were survival mechanisms. Breaking a rule, or worse, ignoring the codes of this hidden world, could bring disaster. The swamp demanded respect, and the family enforced it with subtle, relentless precision. A sudden movement in the fog startled her. A shadow detached itself from the trees, watching her silently. Emma froze, realizing that she was being tested as well. Her presence here had not gone unnoticed. She had crossed a threshold, and now the swamp and its inhabitants were assessing whether she could continue to witness their world safely. Her pulse quickened, but curiosity pushed her forward. She had seen glimpses of their customs, but understanding the rules of the swamp would be the key to unraveling the full story, and to surviving it. Next, we discover the first true danger Emma faces, and how the swamp enforces its secrets. Chapter 9. The First True Danger. The fog hung heavy, curling around Emma's legs as she made her way deeper into the swamp. Every step felt calculated, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. She had begun to understand the family's rules, but tonight the swamp seemed less forgiving, more alive than ever. A sudden splash to her left made her whip her head around. Shadows shifted, and she caught a glimpse of movement, something large, lurking just beyond the edge of the path. Her heart pounded. This was no ordinary animal. The swamp itself seemed to warn her of imminent danger. Ahead, the narrow trail opened into a small clearing, lit by flickering firelight. Emma froze. In the center, a trap had been triggered. Branches snapped, and a net sprung from the mud, ensnaring a small animal. The family members didn't move in panic. They were calm, observing the trap's success with silent approval. Then she felt it, a presence behind her. She turned slowly and saw one of the older children standing perfectly still, eyes dark and unblinking. "You shouldn't be here alone," the child said quietly. There was no anger, only a chilling calmness that made her skin crawl. Emma realized that this was her first lesson in the swamp. It was not just the environment that could harm her, but the people who knew it better than anyone. She took a careful step backward, her mind racing. The child pointed toward a narrow, hidden path. "Follow the rules," the child said, "or you might not leave." Emma swallowed hard, understanding the subtle threat. The swamp had its own way of enforcing boundaries, and tonight she had glimpsed the first consequence of ignoring them. As she moved cautiously down the path, the sounds of the swamp seemed to grow louder, twigs snapping, water splashing, unseen creatures shifting in the darkness. Every instinct screamed for her to turn back, yet curios tintas. Etty, that dangerous companion, pushed her forward. She had come this far, and now retreat felt impossible. Ahead, a faint light flickered in the mist. Emma realized that the deeper she went, the more the swamp itself became a character in the story, a living, breathing entity that demanded respect, enforced its rules, and revealed dangers in slow, deliberate ways. Tonight had shown her the cost of intrusion, but she was determined to uncover more. Next, we discover the chilling discovery Emma makes that reveals just how far the family will go to protect their secrets. Chapter 10. The Hidden Chamber. Emma followed the narrow path deeper into the swamp, her boots sinking into the wet, soft earth. The fog seemed thicker here, curling around her like fingers trying to pull her back. She tightened her grip on the camera, though she knew no photograph could ever truly capture what she was about to see. Ahead, a faint glow peeked through the roots of an enormous cypress. Emma crouched low and approached, careful not to disturb the ground. She discovered a hidden entrance, partially concealed by moss and twisted vines. The opening led into a chamber carved out of the swamp floor, small but unmistakably deliberate, as though someone had created a secret room beneath the trees. Inside, the air was damp and heavy. Strange symbols covered the walls, etched in careful patterns with a substance that glimmered faintly in the firelight. In the center of the chamber, objects lay arranged with meticulous precision: carved figurines, bundles of herbs, and small sealed containers. Emma's pulse quickened as she realized she had stumbled upon the heart of the family's secret life, a place where they conducted rituals and safeguarded their most private knowledge. A sound made her freeze, a low, almost inaudible hum that resonated through the chamber. She turned slowly and saw a figure emerging from the shadows, the matriarch herself. Her eyes were sharp, penetrating, and seemed to look straight through Emma. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "Some things are not meant for outsiders." Emma tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. The matriarch's presence filled the room, commanding attention, demanding respect. Emma understood then that this chamber was the nucleus of the family's world, their traditions, their rules, and their power. Every object, every symbol, every shadow had a purpose. The matriarch stepped closer, examining Emma, with an intensity that made her heart race. "Curiosity can be dangerous," she whispered. "The swamp has already tested you, and now you are here, in the center of it. Do you understand what that means?" Emma swallowed hard. She did understand. She had crossed a boundary, and the consequences were only beginning to reveal themselves. This was no longer just a story. This was a journey into the hidden life of a family untouched by the modern world, and every step forward risked more than she could imagine. The chamber seemed to pulse with energy, shadows dancing across the walls. Emma realized that the swamp, the family, and their secrets were all intertwined in ways she couldn't yet fully grasp. She had entered a world carefully shielded for decades, and now there was no turning back. Next, we discover the shocking relics that reveal the family's darkest secrets, and why outsiders are warned to never return. Chapter 11. Relics of a Dark Legacy. Emma stepped cautiously into the hidden chamber, her eyes scanning every corner. The objects scattered around seemed almost alive, carrying a weight she could feel pressing down on her chest. Carved figurines with hollow eyes stared back at her, and bundles of dried herbs exuded a pungent, earthy aroma that filled the air. On a low table, she noticed a collection of journals, yellowed and frayed with age. Carefully, she opened one and began to read. The entries were meticulous, chronicling decades of survival, isolation, and rituals performed in secrecy. But among the mundane accounts of daily life, there were darker passages, stories of conflicts, strange customs, and warnings against the outside world. The words hinted at a family bound together not just by blood, but by rituals that had shaped their identity over generations. Emma's eyes were drawn to a corner of the room where small relics lay in a neat, almost ceremonial arrangement. Tiny dolls carved from wood, masks with hollow, staring eyes, and objects she could not identify. All seemed to hold a story of their own. She realized these were not mere decorations. They were tools of memory, protection, and perhaps even control. A sudden rustle behind her made Emma spin around. One of the older children stepped forward, watching her silently. The child's eyes were sharp, knowing. "You see the past," the child said softly, "but the swamp guards it fiercely. Every secret has a cost." Emma nodded, swallowing hard. She felt the truth of the words in her bones. The matriarch entered the chamber quietly, her presence commanding attention. She gestured toward the relics. "These are our history, our survival, and our warnings. Outsiders cannot understand, yet here you are. Curiosity is a dangerous companion." Her eyes bore into Emma's. "Some truths are too heavy for those who do not belong." Emma's pulse quickened. She had glimpsed the family's world, but now she faced the reality of its depth. Each relic, each journal, each carved figure was a piece of a legacy hidden from the world for decades. She realized the swamp had protected these secrets, shaping a lineage that would remain unknown if not for her intrusion. Her mind raced with questions. How had this family survived for so long? How had they maintained their isolation? And why had they allowed her to witness even a fraction of their private world? The answers remained elusive, wrapped in shadows and fog. The chamber seemed to pulse with quiet energy, as though acknowledging her presence and warning her simultaneously. Emma knew that whatever she uncovered here would change her forever, and the deeper she went, the more dangerous her curiosity became. Next, we discover the first confrontation Emma faces as the family tests her limits and the consequences of stepping too close. Chapter 12. Testing the Intruder. The swamp had grown quieter, as if holding its breath. Emma's every step echoed softly against the dense undergrowth, yet the fog swallowed most of the sound, leaving her feeling alone, yet intensely watched. She could feel the family's presence, not just in the clearing or chamber, but in the air itself, thick and suffocating. She hadn't expected them to confront her so soon, but as she moved toward another hut deeper in the swamp, shadows shifted. Figures emerged silently from the mist, children, adults, and the matriarch herself. Emma froze, heart hammering, realizing that she had crossed an invisible line. Her curiosity had been noticed, and now she was being tested. The matriarch stepped forward, calm but imposing. "You are here because you seek knowledge," she said. "But knowledge comes at a price. You must understand the rules before you can proceed. Otherwise, the swamp has its ways of correcting mistakes." Her gaze swept over Emma, sharp and unyielding. A young man moved closer, his presence subtle but unnerving. Without a word, he gestured toward a shallow pit partially concealed by moss. "Step too far, ignore the signs," he said softly, "and the swamp itself will decide your fate." Emma glanced at the pit, realizing it was not a trap meant to harm, but a symbol, proof of the swamp's control over those who dared venture too far. She took a cautious step back, her curiosity tempered by fear. The family didn't need to act aggressively. Their silent vigilance and the swamp's natural obstacles were punishment enough. Emma understood that every path she took, every glance she made, was being watched and measured. The matriarch circled her slowly, examining her like one might study a delicate creature. "Some outsiders believe they can observe without consequence," she said. "But the swamp teaches lessons in subtle ways. You must prove you respect the boundaries." Emma nodded, understanding the weight of the words. The swamp, the family, the rituals, they were all intertwined, a system designed to preserve secrecy, tradition, and control. Her presence was tolerated, but only because she had shown caution, attention, and respect so far. One misstep could undo all of that. As the family retreated into the fog, leaving Emma alone, the swamp seemed to sigh, the sounds of unseen creatures returning in muted tones. She knew the next stage of her journey would be far more dangerous. The rules had been made clear, and now she had to decide how far she was willing to push. Next, we discover Emma's shocking encounter with a hidden secret that reveals the family's most guarded truth.
Did you know, long before legends and folklore took shape in the Louisiana swamps, escaped enslaved Africans, known as Maroons, formed independent communities in the marshes and bayous of Spanish Louisiana in the 1700s. These Maroons fled plantations and sought refuge in the nearly impenetrable wetlands east of New Orleans, near Lake Borgne, where they lived autonomously for years. The most well-known leader was Jean Saint-Malo, who organized one such group of runaways that resisted recapture by colonial authorities. In 1784, Spanish forces captured him and his followers after several years of evasive survival, and Saint-Malo was executed in front of New Orleans' St. Louis Cathedral as a warning to others. These swamp settlements represented a real form of resistance and self-liberation from slavery, using the difficult terrain to sustain freedom long before the Civil War.
Chapter 13. The Family's Most Guarded Truth. Emma's curiosity pushed her further into the swamp than ever before. The fog clung to her like a shroud, muffling her footsteps and distorting the familiar sounds of the bayou. Every tree, every ripple of water seemed alive, warning her of boundaries she had yet to recognize. Ahead, a faint glow revealed a structure unlike the others. Larger, older, almost organic in its construction, it seemed to have grown from the swamp itself. Vines wrapped around its walls, and the roof sagged under decades of neglect. Emma felt a chill as she approached. This was no ordinary hut. It was the center of the family's hidden world, the vault of their most guarded secrets. Inside, the air was thick and warm. Shadows clung to every corner, and the faint smell of smoke mixed with earth filled her senses. On a central table lay objects unlike any she had seen before. Meticulously carved dolls, strange symbols etched into wood, and containers sealed with substances that gleamed faintly in the firelight. Emma realized she had entered a sanctum, a place reserved only for the family's most intimate rituals. A sudden movement made her turn. The matriarch stood behind her, her expression unreadable. "You've come far," she said softly, "but some truths are not for those outside. What you see here has kept us alive, hidden from the world, for decades." Emma's eyes scanned the room, noticing journals and relics detailing generations of customs, struggles, and unusual practices that bound the family together. There were stories of hardship, sacrifice, and isolation, but also hints of darker choices made to maintain their way of life. Every artifact was a reminder of their unique identity and the lengths they had gone to protect it. A child stepped forward, holding a small, intricately carved figurine. "This tells a story," the child whispered. "Not everyone can understand it. Only those who respect the swamp and its rules may witness it." Emma accepted the weight of the gesture. She was not just an observer. She was now part of the story, a participant in the careful dance between curiosity and survival. The matriarch spoke again, her voice carrying authority. "This room shows the truth of who we are. The swamp has shielded us, but it also judges. You have been allowed here, but remember, secrets are not just stories, they are bonds, and breaking them has consequences." Emma nodded, absorbing the gravity of the warning. She realized that her journey had reached a critical point. She had glimpsed the family's soul, their most guarded truth, and now had to decide how to navigate the delicate balance between discovery and respect. Next, we discover Emma's daring attempt to uncover a forbidden ritual and the chilling reaction it provokes. Chapter 14. The Forbidden Ritual. The swamp seemed to tighten around Emma as she followed the faint glow ahead. Every rustle of leaves, every splash of water, felt magnified, like the very environment was warning her to turn back. Yet her curiosity, that dangerous companion, pushed her forward. Through a narrow passage, she reached a larger clearing. In the center, a circle of figures stood silently, faces hidden in shadow. They moved with deliberate, synchronized motions, their murmurs forming an eerie rhythm that echoed through the mist. Emma realized she had stumbled upon a ritual forbidden to outsiders, one that had likely never been witnessed by anyone beyond the family. Her camera trembled in her hands. She wanted to capture it, to document it, but instinct screamed that observation alone might provoke consequences. The ritual involved intricate symbols on the ground, small carved objects, and a series of precise gestures performed by each family member. The air was thick with tension, charged with a power that Emma could feel in her bones. Suddenly, one of the younger children noticed her presence. Without a word, the figure gestured toward Emma, a silent warning that her intrusion had been seen. The matriarch stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Emma's with a piercing intensity. "You should not have come here," she said softly, yet the calmness of her voice made it even more terrifying. "Some doors once opened cannot be closed. You have been warned." Emma's heart raced. She realized the gravity of her mistake. The swamp, the family, and their rituals were intertwined in ways she couldn't fully understand. Her presence was no longer neutral. She had entered a sacred space, and the consequences of trespassing were not merely spoken, they were felt in the very air. The matriarch motioned for the ritual to continue, and the family obeyed without hesitation. Emma took careful steps backward, trying to remain unseen. The rhythm of chants and gestures filled the clearing, resonating with the swamp itself. It was mesmerizing, hypnotic, and terrifying all at once. As Emma retreated into the shadows, she understood that she had glimpsed something that outsiders were never meant to witness. The swamp had tested her curiosity, and the family had silently assessed her intentions. Every step from here on would require caution, respect, and awareness, or she risked provoking forces she couldn't comprehend. Next, we discover the consequences of Emma's intrusion and the first real danger the family imposes to protect their secrets. Chapter 15. Consequences in the Fog. Emma's pulse raced as she stepped back from the ritual clearing. The swamp seemed to close around her, each tree and twisted root pressing her forward and holding her in place at once. She had crossed a line, seen a secret never meant for outsiders, and she could feel the weight of the family's scrutiny pressing down like the dense Louisiana fog. A sudden rustle to her left made her freeze. Emerging from the shadows was the same young man who had warned her before. His gaze was steady, but now there was a subtle hardness, a silent reminder that curiosity had consequences. "The swamp watches, and we protect it," he said quietly. "You have stepped too close." Emma tried to speak, but her words faltered. She felt a cold awareness that the swamp was no longer just a backdrop. It was part of the family's power, part of their invisible defenses. Every step she had taken had been measured, and now the cost of her intrusion was beginning to make itself known. The young man gestured toward a narrow passage partially hidden by fog. "You will leave by the path," he said, "or the swamp will decide for you." Emma realized that any misstep now could trap her here indefinitely. The family didn't need to act aggressively. Their presence, their vigilance, and the swamp itself were sufficient deterrents. As she navigated the twisting path, the sounds of the swamp intensified, branches snapping, water sloshing, distant cries that seemed almost human. Her instincts screamed that she was being guided, tested, and perhaps punished all at once. Each step required care, each breath measured against the fog and shadows. Then from the corner of her eye she saw movement, a figure slipping silently through the mist, following her. Emma's heart lurched. She was not being allowed to leave unchallenged. The swamp's guardians ensured that secrets remained protected, and the family had ways of enforcing that protection that went beyond words. Emma's thoughts raced as she pressed on. She understood the full gravity of her intrusion now. The ritual, the hidden chamber, the relics, all of it had been a test. And while she had survived so far, the swamp had reminded her that curiosity came at a price. Her mind clung to one thought. She had to get out, but she also had to understand, to document, to witness. The line between observer and participant had blurred, and she had to navigate carefully to survive. Next, we discover the path that leads Emma to an even darker part of the swamp, and the revelations that could change everything. Chapter 16. Into the dark heart of the swamp. The fog grew denser as Emma pressed forward, each step sinking into the swamp's cold, yielding mud. The sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the air, distant and haunting, but her focus remained on the path ahead. The further she ventured, the more she realized that this part of the swamp was different, older, untouched, and alive with secrets that felt almost tangible. Branches overhead formed twisted arches, dripping with moss that brushed against her shoulders. Every turn seemed to lead her deeper into a labyrinth where time itself felt distorted. Emma's instincts told her to pause, yet curiosity drove her onward, a dangerous companion she could not ignore. Ahead, a faint glow shimmered on the water. Emma approached cautiously, and she saw a small island in the middle of a shallow bayou, barely accessible by a natural bridge of roots and mud. On the island, shadowed figures moved slowly, performing tasks that seemed both mundane and ritualistic. Their movements were deliberate, precise, almost hypnotic. Emma crouched behind a fallen log, observing. She realized that the family had built this secluded part of the swamp for reasons that went beyond survival. It was a sanctuary, a place where their most guarded secrets and practices were carried out away from prying eyes. And tonight, she was witnessing something few outsiders could even imagine. A whisper of movement made her spin. A child stood nearby, observing her silently, their expression unreadable. "You should not be here alone," the child said, voice calm but carrying weight. Emma nodded, knowing the warning was real. The swamp, the family, and the rituals themselves were all intertwined, and she was walking on fragile ground where one wrong step could change everything. The matriarch emerged from the shadows, her presence commanding. She gestured toward the eyes, slant. "This is the heart of our world," she said. "What you see here is not for outsiders. Some knowledge is too dangerous, too powerful. You have been allowed this glimpse, but the swamp remembers every intrusion." Emma's heart pounded. She understood now that her journey was no longer just about witnessing. It was about navigating a web of rules, boundaries, and unspoken consequences. The swamp itself seemed to breathe around her, alive with the family's history, their secrets, and the weight of generations. As she carefully retreated from the edge of the island, Emma knew that the next discovery would take her even deeper into the family's hidden world, where the line between observer and participant blurred completely. Next, we discover the shocking revelation about the family's origin, and the reason they have remained hidden for over 4 decades. Chapter 17. Origins in the Shadows. The swamp seemed to grow heavier as Emma pressed forward, the fog twisting and curling around her like living tendrils. Every step into this secluded part of Louisiana felt like stepping back in time, into a world untouched by outsiders for decades. She could feel history pressing down around her, each tree and shadow holding stories older than she could imagine. Ahead, she glimpsed the family gathered near a cluster of ancient cypress trees, their bark twisted and gnarled like the roots of the secrets they protected. The matriarch stood at the center, holding a worn journal, its pages fragile and yellowed. Emma realized this was not just a story being told. It was a history being enacted, a living record of generations who had survived here, hidden from a world that might never understand them. The entries described a lineage shaped by isolation, by necessity, and by rituals meant to bind the family together. They had chosen the swamp not merely as a refuge, but as a living shield, a place where the outside world's judgments could not penetrate. Emma felt a chill as she read, understanding that the family's secrecy was not born from fear alone. It was survival, culture, and identity intertwined. A young child approached Emma silently, holding a small figurine carved from driftwood. "This tells where we come from," the child whispered. Emma looked closely. The carving depicted a tree, its roots deep and twisting, with figures nestled among the branches. "Our past is hidden in the swamp," the child said. "It is not for strangers to unravel, but you have seen a part of it." The matriarch's voice broke through the mist. "For decades, we have stayed hidden because the world cannot understand what we are. Curiosity is dangerous, but some truths demand witnesses. You have glimpsed the shadow of our past, yet you must know your place." Emma stepped back, overwhelmed. The history of the family was more than stories. It was a lineage carefully preserved, rituals perfected over decades, and boundaries enforced by both people and nature. Every action she had witnessed carried the weight of generations, and now, understanding their origin, she realized the enormity of the secrets she had uncovered. As the night deepened, Emma understood that the family's story was a delicate balance between isolation and survival, secrecy and tradition. To witness more would require courage, caution, and respect beyond anything she had ever known. Next, we discover the family's most intimate ritual and the ultimate test of Emma's presence in the swamp. Chapter 18. The intimate ceremony. Emma moved cautiously, her senses heightened as the fog thickened around her. Every rustle of leaves, every drip of water from the moss above, seemed amplified in the swamp's eerie silence. She had witnessed much, but tonight felt different, heavier, more sacred, as if she were approaching a threshold she was never meant to cross. Ahead, the glow of firelight revealed a small clearing, its edges lined with ancient cypress trees. The family had gathered once more, this time in a tight circle. Their movements were deliberate, precise, and unnervingly synchronized. Emma's heart raced. She understood that she was about to witness their most intimate ceremony, a ritual that had been performed for decades, hidden from any outsiders. The matriarch led the ritual, her voice calm but commanding. The family responded in unison. their gestures following an intricate pattern passed down through generations. Emma noticed objects arranged meticulously, carved figurines, small bundles of herbs, and symbols drawn carefully in the mud. Each element seemed imbued with meaning she could only begin to comprehend. A sudden awareness prickled at the back of her neck. The swamp itself seemed to watch, the mist swirling as if it had a life of its own. Emma understood that this ceremony was more than tradition. It was the essence of the family's survival, a physical manifestation of the rules and protections that had kept them hidden for decades. As she observed, Emma realized the stakes of her presence. The family was aware of her, and her intrusion, while tolerated, had not gone unnoticed. The matriarch's gaze occasionally flicked in her direction, sharp and assessing. Every movement Emma made felt heavy with consequence. The young children participated with solemn precision, guided by the adults in gestures that had likely been practiced for years. Emma felt both awe and fear. Awe at the complexity and beauty of the ritual, and fear at the realization that her presence might disrupt it. The swamp, the family, and their traditions were inseparable. Any misstep could have unforeseen consequences. Emma's mind raced with questions, but she knew the answers were not hers to take lightly. She was a witness to a world few would ever see, and the intimate ceremony had revealed the depth of the family's secrecy and devotion. Her presence here had been a risk, and the swamp had allowed it, but only so far. Next, we discover the consequences of witnessing the intimate ritual, and the choice Emma must make to survive the swamp's judgment. Chapter 19. The swamp's judgment. The night air felt heavier now, thick with the swamp's damp breath. Emma's boots sank into the mud with every step, but she moved cautiously, guided by instinct and the faint glow of firelight from the clearing ahead. She had witnessed the family's most intimate ceremony, and now the weight of their judgment seemed to settle over her like a tangible force. From the shadows, the matriarch emerged, her presence commanding attention without a word. Her eyes scanned Emma, measuring her intentions, assessing her respect for the world she had trespassed into. Emma felt exposed, as though every misstep and glance had been noted, catalogued, and weighed against her very being. "You have seen what few outsiders ever will," the matriarch said softly, her voice carrying both authority and warning. "But witnessing carries responsibility. The swamp has observed you, and it has decided. Your presence here is tolerated, but not without conditions." Emma's pulse raced. She realized the gravity of her position. She was no longer simply a curious observer. She was being tested, judged by a family who had lived in the swamp for decades, shaping its environment to shield their secrets and punish those who overstepped. The swamp itself seemed to echo the sentiment, the mist curling tighter, the shadows elongating, as if the forest were listening. The young man who had warned her before stepped forward, his eyes serious. "You must leave," he said. "Go carefully, follow the paths, and do not stray. The swamp permits your exit because it recognizes your caution. Fail, and the consequences will not be gentle." Emma swallowed hard. The path back through the dense swamp felt narrower, more treacherous, but she knew she had no choice. One wrong step could cost her far more than she was willing to risk. She glanced back at the clearing one last time, at the Fae, Millie standing in solemn silence, and realized she had been part of a story few would ever know. As she began to retrace her steps, the swamp seemed to shift subtly, guiding her safely, yet reminding her at every turn of its omnipresence. Every sound, the splash of water, the snapping of twigs, the call of distant creatures, felt like a warning, a reminder that her intrusion had not gone unnoticed. Emma's heart pounded as she navigated the twisting paths, the fog thick and disorienting. She understood that the swamp and the family it protected had judged her, and that her survival depended on respect, caution, and understanding. She had witnessed the secrets of a hidden world, but the cost of that knowledge had been made clear. Next, we discover Emma's final encounter with the family and the choice she must make to leave the swamp alive. Chapter 20. The Choice to Leave. Emma's legs trembled as she made her way through the dense swamp, each step deliberate, every breath measured. The fog clung to her like a living thing, twisting around her limbs and brushing against her face. She had witnessed centuries of secrets, rituals, and generations hidden from the world. Now the swamp itself seemed to hum with awareness, as if waiting for her next move. Ahead, the clearing appeared one last time, the faint glow of firelight illuminating the family's silhouettes. They stood silently, shadows elongated by the flames, eyes fixed on her. The matriarch stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You have seen much," she said softly, her voice carrying authority and gravity. "The swamp has tolerated your presence, but the choice to leave is yours. Respect the boundaries, or face what the swamp has preserved for those who disregard them." Emma's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed for her to retreat, to obey the warnings she had received for nights. She glanced back at the twisting paths she had followed to reach this point, the fog dense and disorienting. She knew that one misstep now could trap her forever in the labyrinth of trees, water, and shadows. The young man who had first warned her appeared at her side. "Remember," he said quietly, "the swamp judges not with malice, but with precision. Your respect ensures your passage." Emma nodded, her mind racing. She understood now that survival required more than careful steps. It required acknowledgement of a world that she could never truly belong to, no matter how curious she was. Slowly, she began her careful retreat, tracing her path through the mud, roots, and mist. Every sound, the splash of water, the snap of a twig, the distant call of an unseen creature, felt amplified, a reminder that she was being observed even as she moved away. Yet despite the tenses, a sense of reverence filled her. She had glimpsed a hidden world, witnessed secrets that had been protected for decades, and survived the swamp's judgment by showing respect, caution, and humility. When she finally broke through the last cluster of trees, the fog thinned, and the swamp opened to a moonlit expanse. Emma paused, looking back one final time. The family was gone from sight, but their presence lingered in the air, in the shadows, in the weight of the swamp itself. She had been allowed to leave, carrying knowledge few would ever possess, yet the experience had changed her forever. The swamp had tested her curiosity, measured her respect, and guided her safely to the edge of its hidden world. Emma understood that some secrets were meant to remain protected, some histories were never to be disturbed, and some doors, once opened, demanded humility. She stepped into the open night, leaving the fog, the shadows, and the hidden family behind. The swamp had spoken, and she had listened. Disclaimer: this story is purely fictional. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental. The content is intended for mature audiences and is written in a narrative style for entertainment purposes only.